When I first started teaching art, I felt very lost when planning my curriculum. I don't know why I didn't realize that art teachers aren't usually given a curriculum. Maybe there are at some schools, but in all of my experience teaching art, I've had to completely plan my own curriculum. Whereas being an English teacher or a science teacher, a lot of times the school will provide you with textbooks or online curriculum that you can use and just kind of tweak to your own liking. But being an art teacher, a lot of times being the only art teacher at your school, you're a lot more on your own. So if you're like me and you spend a lot of time scouring the internet and YouTube for suggestions or tips or anything having to do with planning your art curriculum, you're in luck, because I'm going to give a couple of tips and talk a little bit about how I plan my art curriculum. Also, while I talk about my different tips for organizing curriculum, I'm going to be working on this gouache painting, so you can watch my process while you also listen to me talk about teaching. So before I get into my tips, I wanted to talk a little bit about my own personal experience. My experience is teaching middle school and high school. I don't have any experience in elementary planning or teaching elementary, but I think a lot of the tips that I'll share can be applied to any age range for the most part. And I have taught online and in person in the classroom, and I have taught public and private. Right now I'm teaching at a private school online for high school students. My experience is also mostly in drawing and painting. Although I've taught multimedia classes, my expertise is more in drawing and painting, if that matters. In this video, I'm also only going to be talking about curriculum planning, so not any like supply management or classroom management, although I think those are huge parts of planning for your art classroom. This is specifically just about curriculum. Before you even get into planning, I have 3 tips for you. The first is Facebook groups. Facebook groups have saved my life so many times. I had a teacher when I first started suggest to me to join a Facebook group. Not only can you post a question and pretty much always get a response, but you can search literally anything that you think of into like the archives of the page and find tons of stuff. You'll find answers to like all types of questions. People will post lesson plans. You can ask about like curriculum in general. Basically everything that I learned online, I learned from Facebook. Obviously, it's great if you know our teachers in real life, but you might not know them depending on your situation. I was the only art teacher at my school when I first started. I did have some other art teachers in the district to reach out to, but I didn't want to bother them all the time. So it was super helpful to join this Facebook group. Second tip before you start planning is to check on the supplies that you have in your classroom. Maybe you already know this, but it kind of depends on the school you're at, what your supply situation looks like. You could be going into a fully stocked art classroom, or maybe it doesn't have that many supplies. It just kind of depends on how the teacher before you left the state of the art program. I would try to get into your classroom or talk to the old art teacher and find out what supplies you have, because that will greatly affect how you plan your year and also like what kind of budget that you have for purchasing supplies in the future. My third tip before you even start planning is to keep it simple. A lot of teachers do extracurriculars at their school. They do an art club or a mural, or they do an art show every year. And it can be hard, especially if you're following a really well built up art program, to feel like you need to do all of that. But for the most part, I would not worry about doing any of that stuff your first year. Just focus on getting the building blocks of your class set up, and you can do an art show next year. Let's get into curriculum planning. First thing you need to do is decide what your curriculum will be based on. There's a couple of different ways you can go about this, and it's also going to depend on the course you're teaching, but I think most of these can still be applied to a drawing course versus an introduction to art course. The first option is to do an elements of art based curriculum. For this, throughout the year, you would move through each of the different elements of art, and you would do projects and lessons with each of them. It doesn't really matter what media you use or what the project specifically is, it just has to correlate with the element of art. For this, I would suggest going in an order like line, color, value, shape, form, space, texture. Something along those lines. I just feel like it's important to do line, value, color, or line, color, value. Do those 3 first, and then you can kind of move on from there. This is a really easy way that your art curriculum feels organized, but it's also not super constricted. You feel like the kids are still learning stuff. This was the first way that I organized my curriculum. I didn't stick with it after the first year, but it was a good way to start. So the second option is just to move through different techniques and materials. This works especially well for like an introduction to art class or art one or something like that, because sometimes it's like, where do you even start with a class like that? So usually I would start with pencil and colored pencil, then we would move into oil pastels and chalk pastels, then watercolor, then acrylics, then printmaking. You could do like some fiber arts, and then ceramic. The nice thing about this method is you're starting with the less messy supplies. This is why this is really good for middle school. Start with the less messy supplies, and then as you move throughout the year or semester, the different media get more messy and complex. This was my favorite method and kind of my tried and true method for teaching an introduction or like a general art class. The final option that I'm going to talk about is doing a artist or art history based curriculum. I have never done this before because it's not really my preferred way of teaching art, but for someone that is an art history buff or super into current and past artists, I think that this could be really interesting and fun for the kids. You could move chronologically through art history and do a different project with each time period or each art movement. I think that that would be really fun, and you could also focus on an artist as you move through each art movement as well. I want to talk a little bit about my process for staying organized while I'm planning. If I'm sitting down in the summer and I'm about to plan a new course or a new curriculum, first thing I do is pull up Google Sheets. I plan all of my curriculum in Google Sheets. I don't know why, I just find that it is works the best for me, but you can use tons of different methods. But basically what I do is I pull up the school calendar and I put every week from the school calendar into the Google Sheets. So this way I know exactly how much time I have, how many weeks I have, where the breaks are, all of that, so I can kind of plan my curriculum over that calendar. Once you've decided what type of curriculum you're going to do, you want to plan out all the units you're going to have. Let's say you're just doing the elements of art. That's easy. You already know what units you'll do. There's 7 of them. But let's say I'm going to do 1 unit a month just to make it easy. So I would go ahead and I like to color code the weeks based on the unit, but I would go ahead and just write what unit I'm going to do for what weeks in the Google Sheets. The next step is planning the projects for the year. I'll go ahead and plan out all of my projects. A lot of times these projects end up changing, so it doesn't have to be, you don't have to stick to it. Sometimes by the end of the year, I like drop a project or find a new one. I usually plan 2 to 4 projects a month. 4 seems kind of a lot. I feel like I don't do 4. 2 to 3 maybe. I don't find that a project ever takes less than a week. Also, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 weeks. It just kind of depends, which is why I don't like plan my whole year in detail, because it will change as you go throughout the year. I kind of plan out all of my projects and I'm not doing anything detailed. I'll just literally write monochromatic landscape and that's all I'm writing. I try to do that for pretty much the whole year. If not the whole year, you could do just the first semester, but I like to do that part for the whole year. Next, I want to go in and plan in detail the first 2 months of school. It doesn't really matter what amount of time you do. I just feel like 2 months makes me feel prepared as I'm going into the school year. So I start planning a little bit more detail those 2 months. So that means I have a general idea kind of how I will scaffold my lessons. For example, if I was doing a still life project, now I'm going to add in information like how to set up a still life, good objects to use for a still life, how to use measuring and proportion to correctly place objects onto your paper when you're doing a still life. Things like that, like different things that I'll need to teach to prep them for the project. And then I'll have maybe 5 days of them working on the still life in class, and then the last days are critique. I just kind of been planning out that a little bit more, so we have a little bit more detail in there. The reason that I don't plan out the whole year like this is because, well, it would take forever, but also things are going to change. Usually even in the first 2 months, I end up changing stuff. Things take longer than you think. You get halfway into the year and then you're like, this was a horrible project idea. Why did I want to do this? This just helps me feel prepared, but things are going to change and you'll have time to plan throughout the year. You have a full 7 or 9 months or however long the school year is. I don't even know. 9 months, right? You'll have a full 9 months to be planning as you're teaching. As long as you have a good skeleton for your curriculum, you can fill it in as you go. My bonus tip for this video is to include an art journal in your curriculum. For teaching in person, especially, an art journal is a lifesaver, especially in middle school where you have a lot more behaviors, because the kids can just come in, grab their art journal, and just get started on whatever drawing or writing activity you have for them in the beginning of class, and you can get everyone settled and put out whatever fires you need to and take attendance. The other reason that I love art journals is I felt it was a really easy way to bring vocab, art analysis, and like art history into the art classroom. Maybe this isn't as much a problem for other art teachers, but I found that I would just kind of forget about that stuff because I was very focused on like teaching them how to use a specific medium or how to do this specific project, and I would kind of forget about like the history of the art technique or specific vocab or like how to analyze and critique their own art. And I feel like those are really important things in an art classroom. I just would forget about them sometimes. So that was really helpful. Like if we were doing a unit, I would always have vocab that they would copy down in the beginning of class in their art journal, and we would reference back to it. So if I'm talking about stippling and they don't know what that is, at least they've already written it down in their notebook that day, and then we can kind of talk about it, and it's somewhere in their brains and memory from earlier in class. I hope this video gave you a little bit of a starting point in planning your curriculum. If there's any other topics you would like me to make videos about, make sure to leave a comment below. Thanks for watching.